There were 7 lamps, 3 on the arms at each side and 1 on the central stem. The candlestick was ornamented with 72 almonds, knops, and flowers. Josephus says 70, but wherever this round number is used by the Hebrews it really means 72. Opposite the candlestick, against the northern wall, was a table bearing 12 loaves of showbread in 2 stacks of 6 loaves each. Calmet is of the opinion that the bread was not stacked up but spread out on the table in 2 rows, each containing 6 loaves. On this table also stood 2 lighted incensaries, which were placed upon the tops of the stacks of showbread so that the smoke of the incense might be an acceptable aroma to the Lord, bearing with it in its ascent the soul of the showbread. In the center of the room, almost against the partition leading into the Holy of Holies, stood the altar of burnt incense, made of wood overlaid with golden plates. Its width and length were each a cubit and its height was 2 cubits. This altar was symbolic of the human larynx, from which the words of man's mouth ascend as an acceptable offering unto the Lord, for the larynx occupies the position in the constitution of man between the holy place, which is the trunk of his body, and the Holy of Holies, which is the head with his contents. Into the Holy of Holies none might pass save the high priest, and he only at certain prescribed times. The room contained no furnishings save the Ark of the Covenant, which stood against the western wall, opposite the entrance. In Exodus the dimensions of the ark are given as 2½ cubits for its length, 1 cubit and a half its breadth and 1 cubit and a half its height. It was made of shittim wood, gold-plated within and without, and contained the sacred tablets of the law delivered to Moses upon Sinai. The lid of the ark was in the form of a golden plate upon which knelt 2 mysterious creatures called cherubim, facing each other, with wings arched overhead. It was upon this mercy seat between the wings of the celestials that the Lord of Israel descended when he desired to communicate with his high priest. The furnishings of the tabernacle were made conveniently portable. Each altar and implement of any size was supplied with staves which could be put through rings. By this means it could be picked up and carried by 4 or more bearers. The staves were never removed from the Ark of the Covenant until it was finally placed in the Holy of Holies of the everlasting house, King Solomon's temple. There is no doubt that the Jews in early times realized, at least in part, that their tabernacle was a symbolic edifice. Josephus realized this, and while he has been severely criticized because he interpreted the tabernacle symbolism according to Egyptian and Grecian paganism, his description of the secret meanings of its drapes and furnishings is well worthy of consideration. He says, when Moses distinguished the tabernacle into 3 parts, and allowed 2 of them to the priests, as a place accessible and common, he denoted the land and the sea, these being of general access to all. But he set apart the 3rd division for God, because heaven is inaccessible to men. And when he ordered 12 loaves to be set on a table, he denoted the year, as distinguished into so many months. By branching out the candlestick into 70 parts, he secretly intimated the decani, or 70 divisions of the planets. And as to the 7 lamps upon the candlesticks, they referred to the course of the planets, of which that is the number. The veils too, which were composed of 4 things, they declared the 4 elements. For the plain linen was proper to signify the earth, because the flax grows out of the earth. The purple signified the sea, because that color is dyed by the blood of a sea-shell fish. The blue is fit to signify the air. And the scarlet will naturally be an indication of fire. Now the vestment of the high priest being made of linen, signified the earth. The blue denoted the sky, being like lightning in its pomegranates, and in the noise of the bells resembling thunder. And for the ephod, it showed that God had made the universe of 4 elements. And as for the gold interwoven, it related to the splendor by which all things are enlightened. He also appointed the breastplate to be placed in the middle of the ephod, to resemble the earth, for that has the very middle place of the world. And the girdle which encompassed the high priest round signified the ocean, for that goes round about and includes the universe. Each of the sardonyxes declares to us the sun and the moon, those, that were in the nature of buttons on the high priest's shoulders. And for the 12 stones, whether we understand by them the months, or whether we understand the like number of the signs of that circle which the Greeks call the zodiac, we shall not be mistaken in their meaning. And for the mitre, which was of a blue color, it seems to me to mean heaven. For how otherwise could the name of God be inscribed upon it? That it was also illustrated with a crown, and that of gold also, is because of that splendor with which God is pleased. It is also symbolically significant that the tabernacle was built in 7 months and dedicated to God at the time of the new moon. The metals used in the building of the tabernacle were all emblematic. Gold represents spirituality, and the golden plates laid over the shittim wood were emblems of the spiritual nature which glorifies the human nature symbolized by the wood. Mystics have taught that man's physical body is surrounded by a series of invisible bodies of diverse colors and great splendor. In the majority of people the spiritual nature is concealed and imprisoned in the material nature, but in a few this internal constitution has been objectified and the spiritual nature is outside, so that it surrounds man's personality with a great radiance. Silver, used as the capitals for the pillars, has its reference to the moon, which was sacred to the Jews and the Egyptians alike. The priests held secret ritualistic ceremonies at the time of the new and the full moon, both of which periods were sacred to Jehovah. Silver, so the ancients taught, was gold with its sun ray turned inward instead of objectified. While gold symbolized the spiritual soul, silver represented the purified and regenerated human nature of man. The brass used in the outer altars was a composite substance consisting of an alloy of precious and base metals. Thus, it represented the constitution of the average individual, who is a combination of both the higher and the lower elements. The 3 divisions of the tabernacle should have a special interest to Freemasons, for they represent the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, while the 3 orders of priests who served the tabernacle are preserved to modern masonry as the entered apprentice, the fellow craftsman, and the master mason. The Hawaiian Islanders built a tabernacle not unlike that of the Jews, except that their rooms were one above another and not one behind another, as in the case of the tabernacle of the Israelites. The 3 rooms are also the 3 important chambers of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The robes of glory. As explained in the quotation from Josephus, the robes and adornments of the Jewish priests had a secret significance, and even to this day there is a religious cipher language concealed in the colors, forms, and uses of sacred garments, not only among the Christian and Jewish priests but also among pagan religions. The vestments of the tabernacle priests were called kain. Those of the high priest were termed kain rab over the machanes, an undergarment resembling short trousers. They wore the shithun, a finely woven linen robe, which reached to the ground and had long sleeves tied to the arms of the wearer. A brightly embroidered sash, twisted several times around the waist a little higher than is customary, with one end pendant in front, and a closely fitting linen cap, designated mosnimshus, completed the costume of the ordinary priest. Insert. The garments of glory. From Mosse's History der Hebreeus Kirk. Th robe of the high priest of Israel were often called the garments of glory, for they resembled the regenerated and spiritualized nature of man, symbolized by a vestment which all must weave from the threads of character and virtue before they can become high priests after the order of Melchizedek. Continued. The vestments of the high priest were the same as those of the lesser degrees, except that certain garments and adornments were added. Over the specially woven white linen robe the high priest wore a seamless and sleeveless habit, sky blue in color and reaching nearly to his feet. This was called the mir and was ornamented with a fringe of alternated golden bells and pomegranates. In Ecclesiasticus, one of the books rejected from the modern Bible, these bells and their purpose are described in the following words: and he compassed him with pomegranates, and with many golden bells round about, that as he went, there might be a sound and a noise that might be heard in the temple, for a memorial to the children of his people. The mir was also bounden with a variegated girdle finely embroidered and with gold wire inserted through the embroidery. The ephod, a short vestment described by Josephus as resembling a coat or jacket, was worn over the upper part of the mir. The threads of which the ephod was woven were of many colors, probably red, blue, purple, and white, like the curtains and coverings of the tabernacle. Fine gold wires were also woven into the fabric. The ephod was fastened at each shoulder with a large onyx in the form of a button, and the names of the 12 sons of Jacob were engraven upon these 2 stones, 6 on each.